I don't have a skit for this intro because all those how-to video essay articles and videos I've been watching and reading all say that you should establish a tone at the beginning of your video. So, aiming for a bit of ridiculous sincerity, I'm hoping just being dressed like this is enough of a joke for you. So Spider-Man for PS4 just came out, and it's already a big hit. Which is no real surprise, because if you ask a bunch of people who their favorite superhero is, I guarantee one of the most popular, if not the most popular answer would probably be Spider-Man. He's quiet, nerdy, awkward, and basically the epitome of what people reading comic books would probably look like if we went out to fight crime. Or basically he's the most relatable to his audience. But I'm not here to talk about that Spider-Man. I'm here to talk about this Spider-Man. The changes, the reasons, and I think the reason why Miles Morales is such an excellent version of inclusion, and honestly, why I think he's so important in my life. So long ago, I was just as happy as any other gamer to see Spider-Man finally coming to consoles and being made by Insomniac Games. The same studio that made Spyro, and even if you don't like that game, you have to admit it's at least made by people who know what good games look like. And see, I've bought nearly every Spider-Man video game and suffered through their terrible controls and crappy beat-em-up style mechanics, all because I love everyone's favorite web crawler. So, when I heard he was finally going to be made by a reputable game studio, I was stunned. And then, to even heighten that hype, I heard that Miles Morales was going to be featured in the game. I was so ready to swing around New York as Miles, venom blast some bad guys, turn invisible, and save some balloons. But then I played the game. And it wasn't bad. I don't think this is a bad game. However, I do think there's something very wrong with this adaptation of Miles Morales. First off, you don't get to really play as Miles Morales in the suit, which was a bummer, but more importantly, this interpretation of Miles, which the more research I'm doing, is a fair number of people's first real exposure to him. Which, I know that's not everyone, but I think it's worth mentioning. This Miles is just so simple. Not boring, but lacking in all the complexity of Miles. Simple in a game, mind you, that has been ridiculously praised for its focus on narrative storytelling. Miles Morales in Spider-Man for PS4 is just kinda a good boy. He's a big Spider-Man fan with a great relationship with his parents, and needless to say, something tragic happens and Peter helps him get him through his issues, and that's it. There's not really much else there, and to add insult to injury, most people just assume that he'll probably be Peter Parker's sidekick in the next game. And I feel like this adaptation of Miles is like, fine, with a capital F. Because, well, Miles' story and motivations are more complicated than just something tragic happened to me. Because Miles didn't want to be Spider-Man. It was a responsibility forced on him that he rejected for completely justifiable reasons, but soon realized that New York needed him to be Spider-Man. You see, right around the time that Miles became Spider-Man, Peter had just died, and Magneto had just used his powers to kill off a bunch of people, including some big names at the time. So during his conception, having powers was not a good thing. It made you different. It made you labeled as a mutant, which was a dangerous label at the time. He didn't want these powers. He was over at his uncle's house and the spider bit him on accident. Now, oops, sorry Miles. Even in just that, Miles already has a way more complicated relationship to his identity and relationship to Spider-Man than this PS4 adaptation. I feel like I should also say that, don't get me wrong, adaptation isn't bad, adaptation is fine, so long as it carries its own complexity. Like the new movie coming out, Miles has a similar dynamic, but the movie shows his father's distaste for Spider-Man, yet how much he loves Miles, and Miles wanting to care and love his dad while still also upholding his relationship to the city, puts him in this opposing sides, but also on each other's side, with one another that's interesting and cute and engaging. This is not that. And I can keep going. Miles' relationship to Peter has taken multiple forms, but the relationship is merely just for Peter's conscience in the game. Miles in his comic book has always had to come to terms with the guilt he felt for realizing he could have helped save Peter, then only being told Peter's mission statement by his grieving family. Was his dad a loving and caring father like in the game? No, he was a jerk who abandoned him when Miles revealed his identity. His uncle, who's paralleled with Uncle Ben, Instead of inspiring him, put him at his lowest and showed him the villain he could become. And where's Genki? Because he has a best friend who helps and supports him through all of this. That is sorely missing from this iteration. And okay, I hope you're starting to get my point. And I only bring this up because I honestly haven't seen anyone really writing about this yet. And I feel like it's worth bringing up. And I also know that a lot of this is kind of personal to me. Because Miles is really important to me. Kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, everyone likes Spider-Man. Which is great. There's so much that I can relate to in Peter. But Miles came out and started to formulate his identity around the same time that I did. You see, as I hit middle school and I began to become a little more aware of myself, as we all do, namely how I was different from everyone else around me, I went to school with a largely white demographic. And as a result, I didn't really fit in anywhere. I was a little too brown for the kids there, and whenever I complained about it at home, my dad would always tell me something like, it was the best school where we lived and I had chances at education that other kids like me didn't have. And so, what do you know, the first few pages of Miles' comic, he gets into a prestigious school on a lottery. And the comic even makes a point to show Miles looking at all the other kids that didn't win. Then the second issue, who are the kids picking on him? Bunch of older white kids. Then when he tries to tell his best friend about it, he tells him to embrace his difference. But Miles knows what being a mutant, a term that's always been racially coded, means you're a threat to people around you. And see, that's what I'm talking about. These are the issues that I was aware of, but I didn't have the words for. This is the complexity I'm talking about. These problems of not only being Spider-Man, a superhero of youth and nerdiness, but also being a Spider-Man of color and all the nuance in between. Because guess who kills his mom? Not a criminal, not a villain. Yeah, police officers. And lucky my mom is alive and well. But I remember reading that and being really touched. It was viscerally easy for me to imagine that it was my mom who had just been killed. And Miles' story would continue on and on with each issue, as would my connection to him. Skipping over a lot of the details, Miles' dad leaving, dismissing him when he tried to reveal his identity as Spider-Man. Yeah, a lot of times when I tried to express myself, it didn't go over too well with my dad either. Miles struggling with his anger through an entire arc because the society we live in is so quick to label you. And I don't think I need to explain the angry black or brown man stereotype, and I remember trying my best to act calm even when people I knew called me slurs like Beaner, because I knew if I freaked out then that's all I'd be to them. Specifically, I remember one time one of my friends took something from my bag and was trying to run away, so I grabbed his backpack, and then a teacher that we both had came up to me and asked me, "What are you doing wrong?" And with all the police issues being a media focal point for the last few years, despite its long history, Civil War II came out as a conflict about profiling, and it's not that great, but it does have a good moment. At the end, it's predicted that Miles will kill Captain America, and then Captain Marvel doesn't believe him and tries to arrest him. This story shows how even someone like Miles, who's always trying his best, is still a threat. In addition, the fact that at that point in time, Captain America was evil and everyone immediately chose to villainize Miles. So what does that say? And I think it's worth noting that Peter Parker was on Captain Marvel's side during this conflict. And it all just reminds me how I've heard some of my friends say things like, police officers should get the benefit of the doubt and bad cops are the minority, but, you know, they're not the ones being predicted to be evil. And I've been stopped for being suspicious, you know, followed around malls, or just getting pulled over for a broken taillight. Yet, everyone I knew and grew up with loves Spider-Man. But so many of them, they all lived Peter's life, while I lived a life closer to Miles. It's those differences that makes Miles a Spider-Man get a completely different story to tell. It's what makes Miles feel like my Spider-Man. Like he was created just for me. It's why he's so important to me. So when stories like Spider-Man on PS4 come out and they just simplify all his complexity and stories into just a kid who lost his loved one, feels like a shame. Because that's not Miles. That's just kind of an extension of Peter. Those aren't really the aspects of what makes Miles as a character unique. It's just not him. But that was a lot. But thank you if you stayed all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. And, I noticed that. I know that, that Miles is so many things to so many people. It's not saying that I have complete ownership of Miles. I'm just saying it's a very important character to me. But for now, that's all I got. Till the Spider-Man movie comes out, and I'm sure I'll have opinions on that too. But for now, comment below about superheroes or characters that best represented you. And I'll see you all next time.